You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Welcome to TFM's Local Watering Hole. I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is every single week, the brilliant, nay, dare I say, incredible, Christy Morris.
Hey, I'm here and back ready to talk about some crane kicks and some, beating the drum, all of the cool karate moves.
Yes. I mean, way better than the crow kick. I mean, let's be honest. The crane kick is so much cooler.
Yeah, just even the name. I mean, the crow.
Yeah. Oh, man. It's going to be so much fun, though, getting an opportunity to be able to talk through Karate Kid 2 here. It's really fun as we're continuing our Karate Kid retrospective, which I'm really excited about because, I hadn't seen 2 in a while. I haven't seen 3 and just as long, and I've not watched Cobra Kai yet, so that'll be fun for us to get to that as well. So I'm really excited about all of this.
I'm glad you're excited because this has been one of my big franchises since I was a little kid. I know I've seen the first Karate Kid over and over again, and sad that I had to miss talking about it on here with you, but at least now I'm on for the rest of the ride, and I have seen Cobra Kai, so I promise not to give you any spoilers.
Okay, good, because I don't want any spoilers for what happens. I definitely want to be able to experience, but I am just super excited. And this is really cool because it is a series, another great 80s series to kind of be able to go back to. And, it's really fun to see how, these things hold up. So before we get into it, of course, remember you can find the show wherever you get your podcast. Please do make sure you're subscribed so you get the podcast as soon as it drops. Of course, we've got the Snyder Cuts going on right now with John Mills and I that you could find in the same feed. So you're getting 2 podcasts for the price of 1, and it's free. So make sure you're checking it out and subscribed there. Again, you can give us, if you're on Apple Podcasts, please give us a star rating review. Let people know what you think of the show. It continues to help the show grow since it's a big place for people to find podcasts. But of course, you can find us, on like Spotify or Amazon Music or just anywhere podcasts be had. You could find the 602 Club. And Christy, I wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who has been listening. I wanted to surprise you with this, but this is legitimately not only the biggest month that we've ever had, but it's the biggest month in the history of the 602 Club by, we almost hit 20,000 downloads in 1 month.
Holy crap. Wow. Yeah. That is a big surprise. And, obviously I haven't been here the entire time, but I've been here for a few years now. And I just, I need to throw in a huge thank you too. And we actually got a really nice tweet the other day from Tatooine.
We did.
Hugs.
We did. In fact, thanks for reminding me of that, Christy, because I also did really want to say thank you to them for that tweet. We try to, be as interactive as possible with everybody on social media right now, and in general, we love interacting with people, and we're really thankful for everybody who does interact with us over on Twitter. But we did get a great tweet the other day at us, and it is definitely something that I wanted to share because it really meant a lot to Christy and I to hear. And so they said, in an effort to promote some positivity at the end of a bad month, I'm going to shout out a podcast that consistently kindles my love of all things Star Wars movies, books, and comics at the 602 Club, at Matt Rushing 02, at Bespin Bell, at the Jedi Masters, at Kessel Junkie. And this was from TatooineScene.com. And so thank you so much for that. It really did. I know, Christy and I both responded to the tweet. So did John. And we really do appreciate it because it means a lot to us, to hear back from the fans and be able to interact with you as listeners. And so in that vein, Christy, we are doing a contest right now going till March 23rd when this is going to be released, because we're going to give away the 4K edition of the new remastered version of Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition. Zack Snyder went in and remastered that specifically because he noticed when he was watching it there in the 4K edition, there were some color corrections that needed to be made to that he liked better. Also, he reinserted all of the things he filmed in IMAX in the IMAX ratio. So we're giving this away for free. All you have to do is follow us on Twitter. So go over to @the602 Club and make sure you're following us. Now, this is only for the USA and mainly just has to do with where this is available. Yeah, again, just make sure you're following us and you could win. You literally only have to be following the 602 Club on Twitter to be entered to win. So, and you can find us on Instagram at the 602 Club TFM. You can also find us, of course, online at Trek FM, where all the podcasts we do are housed. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. And of course, you can send us an email over at trek.fm/contact. And so, and a huge thank you as well, not only to the people that have been listening to us and giving us such a huge record month, but huge thank you to those people who support the network over on Patreon at patreon.com/TrekFM. We've got our associate producers here on the show, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Ryan Maillet, and Daniel Noah. We really do appreciate them making sure that all of these podcasts keep coming to you ad-free. And so if you love what we do, we could definitely use your help. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM. You can see how you can become part of the team. Honestly, guys, every little bit helps. So, again, that's patreon.com/TrekFM. So, with all those thank yous, Christy, we're here to talk about The Karate Kid Part 2. And this is not a movie that I had seen in a long time here, but I thought it was really interesting how we follow up Part 1 by literally beginning where we ended. And, pretty much, we and not only that, not only do we follow right where we begin or left off, but we also kind of set up what the main theme is going to be through the movie. So, how did you feel about that kind of coming back to it and the way that this brings us into this Part 1? Because we start with a follow up, but then we kind of go 6 months later, and a lot of things change.
Yeah, I think that you kind of need it because, the movies didn't come out exactly the same time, of course. So, it had been a little time since the last one, and people, I think, sometimes need a refresher. But also, it really informs more where this one is going to go. And I think that you don't realize it the first time you see this movie, but, since you and I have seen it multiple times now, I think we've figured it out. That's also sort of a setting up of what is to come as far as themes in Part 2. So, it leans a little bit more into the romance this time, of course, but also is going to reflect again on the relationship between a sensei and his student and between, two enemies and how they resolve that.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see that, of course, I think in the first movie, you almost kind of wanted there to be a fight between Miyagi and Kreese, right? And so we actually get that here, as we're following up because it's in the parking lot after the tournament. And what I love about the fight that they have is that it honestly sets up the move too, that Miyagi is going to teach Daniel with the drum. The movement that Miyagi makes is the one where as somebody comes at you with a punch, you're not there. Right. And so we set all of that up through a fight here, but we also set up this whole the whole theme of forgiveness and bitterness and what all that means. And so I thought that was really strong, actually. And again, it lets, Mr. Miyagi kind of, we said it in the first episode, but, Miyagi in many ways is basically Yoda.
Oh, yeah.
For this series. And so that was really neat. But then, we do jump to 6 months later, and a lot of things change very quickly for Daniel and for Miyagi that kind of set up the rest of the movie.
But it's nice too, because I will say before we jump into then that I think that they wanted to take the focus away from so much being about his relationship with how he and Billy are going to get on at this point, or if he and his girlfriend are going to continue going out or whatnot. I'm kind of glad that they made up a reason to move on without the two of them in this one, because he's also at that point where he's graduating high school, because Miyagi mentions, you need money for college. And so he's kind of at a good in-between point where he could possibly do something different and also get some space from all of that drama where he was living. So I like that it's not all about them anymore. And then too, I did want to add that I think that the fight between Miyagi and Kreese is hilarious, because they come back to it later again. He's merciful, but also really funny, where he makes that move with his hand like he's going to take him out with one final punch, and then he honks his nose. I love that. And I love that then Daniel does it later. So...
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's really great that, again, the way that fight works out, and the way it allows Miyagi to kind of set up the theme, for where we're going to, this whole movie is going to be about, right? And what I thought what was great about how the way it follows up with part one is just that it continues building on the themes that had been played out in part one, and we're going to kind of do... a version of it where it's even more grown up, right? The first movie definitely felt like a high school movie, and this movie feels like, it does kind of feel like the kind of things that you're learning as a young adult, right? When you get out of high school and you're going into college and you're in that age range. And so I think that that's really cool. So I wanted to ask you though, like when they do the 6 months later jump, and, we've got Daniel's mom who's going to be moving again. So Daniel is kind of like, am I moving? What's going to happen to me? And we have Allie dump him for a football player, which I was looking to see. I didn't see any like behind the scenes info of like if that was just the part of the story, or they went with that part of the story just because, maybe Elizabeth Shue wasn't available or something. But how did you feel about especially those two things there as, we again jump 6 months later?
The only part that I didn't like about it was that they never show his mom. So it feels a little too much like it was thrown in that he was supposedly going to make this move to Fresno and he's really bummed. And then suddenly Miyagi says, well, actually, you're going to live with me. And then wait, no, actually, we're going to Okinawa. I think it would have helped me a little bit with believing that more if they actually showed a conversation between Miyagi and Daniel's mom about it. But aside from that, I mean, I completely think that him with his breakup is fine. I thought it was kind of silly that they also blamed crashing the car on her. Like, what does that do? You're like, yeah, she left me for another guy and she crashed my car. She's terrible.
See, what I got about that, it wasn't that she crashed her car. I got the feeling like she had put maybe something in the car that wasn't supposed to be in there. Like, like maybe she did the oil wrong or something.
Oh, like Miyagi fixed it.
Yeah, he fixed it pretty quickly. So,
okay.
Yeah. But no, it was really interesting. And I thought, again, as you watch the rest of the movie, it was interesting because it did feel more like it wasn't just something where, they needed to write the actress out, but they really wanted to kind of move Daniel forward. as a character, and part of doing that was almost letting go of this kind of, again, we're moving out of high school into college, right? And life is more about a more adult relationship, right? I mean, he's 18 years old now. He's moving into college, and so what that's going to be like. And so a big part of that, I wanted to ask you, not only do we get 6 months later, but that 6 months includes us going to a completely different location, that we are going to go to Okinawa. And so how did that work for you here in this film as we have a completely new place to be spending our time for the rest of the film?
I think that that's actually the biggest benefit of this film, is the location change and focusing on Miyagi's roots and how that affects him as a person, who he became, how he teaches Daniel, and his belief in forgiveness and mercy and kindness, and avoiding a fight whenever possible rather than encouraging violence. And so he gets to actually bring Daniel with him to see where he grew up, his father and his dojo, and then what happened between him and Sato. Because Miyagi before this is always very reserved about talking about his personal life. It's always more focused on everyone else and teaching Daniel about life rather than talking about himself. And he's very much reserved with that until he trusts people more. And so I think that he could see, in that scene, especially where he and Daniel are talking at the airport, he finally is convinced to let Daniel in a little bit more and says, okay, you can come with me.
Yeah, I really liked that. What I loved about them going to Okinawa, and even like you were talking about this kind of like confrontation that him and Miyagi have about whether or not he should, go. Mm-hmm. I love this whole idea of, there's a very biblical theme about older men training younger men and younger women being trained by older women. And I thought it was really interesting because we kind of see that. I mean, obviously there's a very close mentor-like relationship between Daniel and Miyagi. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, obviously, Daniel is the surrogate son that he never had.
Yeah.
Because his child was lost in childbirth and his wife had died, and he never had those things again. And so, but what I really loved about this was that, part of growing up is learning to take care of other people other than just yourself. Right. And being willing to be there for others. And I thought that was really a beautiful thing to see, that by them going to Okinawa, you give Daniel the opportunity to be able to be there for Miyagi in a way that he's been there for Daniel, mm-hmm. And be the support. And because as they're going there, it's going to be very difficult for Miyagi. And if he hadn't had that support of Daniel, I think it wouldn't have gone as well for him, and again, too, it allows Daniel to be able to continue his growth process of learning what it truly means to be a man. And I mean, he's going to be then confronted with, two different forms of manhood. Again, John and I talked a lot about, when we talked about this kind of toxic masculinity that Daniel sees with Kreese's group. Mm-hmm. As opposed to Miyagi. And again, we're confronted with that in this movie by going to Okinawa, seeing a twisting of honor, quote unquote honor, right? Mm-hmm. As a twisted form of, I would say, again, toxic masculinity. So we get a chance to see that here by going to Okinawa, that this is not just a problem that happens, here in America. Mm-hmm. This is a problem we see everywhere, right? Of this twisted version of what it means to be a man and what it doesn't mean to be a man. And again, by going to Okinawa, we get to kind of play with some of these themes again, but in a different context. And I think many of the things that we kind of see in the movie are similar to what we saw in the first movie, but I think by going to Okinawa, it gives us the opportunity to make them feel fresh again, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we don't just stay, in California that we move locations, and that allows us to explore some of those same themes, but then add new themes and mix it all together, and it feel much more fresh than it would have if we had just stayed where we were.
Absolutely. And two, it's like, you know, going back to the roots of where karate itself even began. And Miyagi telling the story about, I love, you know, his father's sensei, I think he said Shinpo, that liked sake and liked fishing and fell asleep on his fishing boat after drinking too much and landed in China. He came back and started Miyagi-Do. I think that's so cute. But, you know, it's nice to have that aspect of, you know, the cultural piece of Japan, then also showing how that influences Miyagi's lifestyle and like his beliefs. And even showing Daniel, you know, when it's just him and Kamiko. The tea ceremony I thought was really nice. You know, it's like they take a beat to really just slow down and there aren't even any words, but it's sort of like a really nice private moment of him being on a real date, you know, like more like an adult, and, you know, learning how to be respectful of someone else's culture and to try new things. But also that it's like this very, reserved culture as well. You know what I mean? Like there's not PDA in Japanese culture. That's not how they do a date, you know? So it's like a date for them was a tea ceremony.
Yeah. I just thought it was it really helped the movie overcome a lot of the things that you run into with a sequel. You know,
right.
By going to Okinawa, it gives you the opportunity to, again, even if you're covering some of the same type of themes and material that you've done in the first movie, by being in a different place, you get an opportunity to cover up some of that. And I was really interested in finding out too that, you know, they didn't actually get to film on Okinawa because unfortunately Okinawa, like we kind of saw, and they allude to the fact that it's the presence of military bases is really taking over most of the island. So other locations in Japan and then in Hawaii were used to do this filming, and I thought it was really cool because they did film in Oahu on this privately owned location, and they gave them a large piece of land to be able to use, and they actually built 7 authentic Okinawan houses along with the 3 acres of crops they planted. So I just thought that was really neat. You know, that they were trying to be as true to form as they could. And I thought that was really cool. So again, even just going to Okinawa, you had this really cool opportunity. So, so one of the themes, Christy, that got, you know, obviously played out at the very beginning of the movie, and it's the first thing that Miyagi really says that's Yoda-ish, you know, in this film, where he says, you know, for a person with no forgiveness in their heart, living is worse than death. And this whole idea of forgiveness and kind of the opposite of that, bitterness, you know, I thought was such a relevant theme, because I feel like we kind of live in a world where forgiveness and grace have been lost. And it was something that I really loved, like from Kreese all the way to Sato and you know, his little henchman. The whole thing is really about this idea of are you going to be somebody who has no forgiveness in their heart, so that when the time comes that you can't even live up to your own expectations, you're going to be utterly devastated? Or are you going to be somebody that mistakes are allowed? You know, like mistakes are, like, you can make mistakes and you can forgive not only others, but yourself for that. And I thought, you know, this is a really important theme. And again, I was really struck by how I feel like even more relevant it is now than maybe even when this movie came out, because I just feel like we live in the world where forgiveness and grace are completely lost on us anymore.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way watching this. And I think that's the biggest theme for me throughout the movie that I saw was that I've also heard the phrase, when you hold on to a grudge, it doesn't hurt the person you're upset with. It only hurts you. Mm-hmm. And it's true.
Yep.
I mean, think about how long Sato held that anger. It was years and years and years, probably like 40 years or something. And there were things that Miyagi didn't even know. He didn't know if Sato still was alive, much less was still angry, and didn't know if he and Yuki had ended up marrying or not. He figured they did, but it turned out they didn't. But Miyagi was able to leave that in Japan and actually emotionally move on, as well as physically starting over in America. And so I think that that's fascinating then when he's going back, not only like you're saying with the situation with Kreese and teaching Daniel, but also then in Okinawa showing Daniel that it's something that you have to do, because you can't just let that eat away at you, and that you might make mistakes and need someone to forgive you. And I think that the scene that illustrated it the best for me as well was when Daniel is trying to save the little girl, and Sato's protege says, I can't help him, because you can tell he's basically saying, I can't let go of my anger enough to go and help him. Mm-hmm. And Sato even realizes then the error in his own ways in rubbing off on a student like that, and decides he's going to be different and goes and helps Daniel himself. So yeah, that's totally, to me, the biggest thing to learn from this movie is that forgiveness has to be given and received in order for you to have a life that you're going to be happy with.
I'm reminded of when you said that, obviously we've even talked about the idea, of Miyagi being like Yoda, but there is such a connection between like that whole idea and, what Luke says to Vader, when he says, I feel the conflict within you, let go of your hate, and I think that this movie is a really beautiful picture of what hate can do to a heart when you hold on to it for so long and it becomes bitterness. Because I think what we see at the beginning of the movie, Kreese passing on this hate, basically. This hate for oneself that you can be nothing but perfect, right? This perfectionism that drives him so that anything less than perfect is not good enough and becomes something that you hate even about yourself and about others around you. And Sato, on the other side, has let this hate and this anger build up in him to where it's completely consumed his life. And he's taken it out on an entire town. Right?
Yeah.
Like, he's destroyed the industry of an entire town because of his anger with Miyagi and, the woman that he was supposed to marry. Mm-hmm. And again, I thought, and I don't know if you felt this way, but I was really struck by the way in which when Sato lets that go, because there's even that moment where he's being saved by Miyagi and Daniel, and he's still kind of yelling at him, right? And it's not actually until he goes out to help save the other people, right? And then he sees what Daniel's doing. Mm-hmm. It's Daniel's actions of climbing up that ladder, right, that I think really kind of just blow open his mind as to what it really means to be a good person, to be a man, to be willing to put your life on the line for another person. And again, this is for Daniel, who he doesn't live here. He doesn't really know these people, right? Mm-hmm. But he's just willing to do the right thing regardless of the cost. And I really love it. And to me, to see Sato come around was really a beautiful thing. It was so, for him to be able to kind of accept the forgiveness of Miyagi, to accept the forgiveness of the entire town, really, because he's willing to let go of his hate. And I mean, like, it's beautiful because Miyagi immediately accepts him back because he was never angry at him in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And this whole thing about forgiveness was so beautiful because, like, again, I think we've just lost the ability in our culture to have grace and forgiveness, to allow people to be human. Like, we're all going to make massive mistakes in our lives, right? We're all, but those mistakes don't have to define us for the rest of our lives if the people around us are willing to allow us to have forgiveness, and we're willing to forgive ourselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, especially when somebody owns it and says, I've made a mistake, like Sato did to Miyagi, you know, Miyagi was already willing to forgive him anyway, but then, you know, it's nice to also hear the person say, I want to be a different person. I shouldn't have done what I did. And yeah, that's why that's so beautiful, seeing them be able to move on and seeing, like you're saying, even when Miyagi goes to save him and Sato doesn't believe him at first, Miyagi then even says, come on, my friend, when he's trying to pick him up and carry him to safety. I caught that. And, you know, that's a really telling thing because Sato's language toward him was always just degrading and, you know, like, I don't even know you anymore kind of thing. And Miyagi still calls him my friend. So, yeah, that was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I thought that was great too, like you said, in the fact that that for Miyagi, he's never not considered him a friend. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Well, and I think this goes to something to which this movie also talks about, which is the idea of bravery and honor. Because early in the movie, you know, we have Daniel. He's obviously seen Miyagi's Medal of Honor, and he makes this box for it. And Miyagi, you know, he says that, you know, honor and bravery are not found in awards and medals, right? He's like, this doesn't mean I was brave. It just means I was lucky, you know?
Yeah.
But what we kind of see throughout the film and what's portrayed by the characters is that being brave is doing the hard thing and the right thing, no matter what the cost. That's what it truly means to be brave. And I really love that we see that played out over and over again with especially Miyagi and Daniel, who are thrust into these positions where it is very difficult to do the right thing over and over again, especially when they are being persecuted. You know, they're being trashed. They're being beaten up, you know? And I think there is something really beautiful about the way that they just continue to show what true bravery is, which is in the face of intense opposition, in the face of you know, threat to their own existence, right? They continue to just do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes because for any of us, if you put yourself in that position, it would be hard to not lash out in anger because of the way that you're being treated rather than continuing to do the right thing. But Daniel learns from Miyagi that that's not the way that's going to get you what you want. And that ultimately what's the most respectful is to always do the right thing even when nobody's watching. But, you know, I do think I'm glad you mentioned about the medals because that really caught me as well, that Miyagi has always been very humble. And, you know, I like that later then he even says, I think it was like, what was it? It was like, you know, the only people whose opinion you should care about is your own or something like that. You know, he was talking about how are people going to know that you're telling the truth. Sorry, I'm not saying it very well. But anyway, it basically, Miyagi feels like you don't need to prove to other people that you're a good person. Just always do the right thing and that'll speak for itself. And just like you don't need medals to prove that you were brave, that's just showing that you survived. You know in your heart what kind of person you are.
Yeah, and I think, this is the place too, with this idea of bravery, we really are discussing too what it means to have real honor, and true honor is somebody who sticks to their word, and again, regardless of the cost. And, I think what we saw here is that Miyagi has really stuck to what it means to have true honor, which is, he wasn't willing to fight his friend to the death for a woman, right? Like that wasn't willing. That was not appropriate use of this type of combat. Fighting over a woman to the death is not appropriate.
Right. Whereas Sato felt really that shows honor.
Yeah. Right.
Which is completely the opposite.
Yeah. So I really love that. I thought it was great.
I'm glad, too, that subject of honor in particular is mentioned several times, clearly showing you who has twisted honor to mean something incorrect and who is actually upholding what honor really means. And, even when Miyagi tells Daniel before they ever get to Okinawa, he says, that honor has no time frame, because Daniel thinks, well, people should just let this stuff go. Or, like you can fudge things if you need to or whatever to, get people to let it go. And Miyagi's like, no, like that's not how it works. It's something that you'll always remember, even though you can forgive. But that he's also trying to say that being a good person doesn't have a time frame, is what I got from that.
Yeah. No, I mean, because, the first movie, too, had this conversation about, like, when to fight and when not to, And I really loved that, Miyagi was willing to honor the fight against Sato when it came down to him fighting for more than just himself.
Right. Then he was for saving the village. But if it's about a woman...
Yeah,
you're right. Like,
yeah,
he's not going to do that.
Exactly, because it's fighting for the livelihood of like you said, the entire village. It's fighting for the honor of the lives of all of them to continue to exist, as they do. And so, yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think that it also shows too in the scenes where, just to kind of bring it back to also the doing the right thing, when every time the henchmen come in and destroy the garden or destroy all the little bonsai trees and beat Daniel up and everything, he still just takes it, and then when they leave, cleans it up again. And I think that also speaks hugely about bravery and honor and doing the right thing, because Daniel easily could have gone and tried to seek revenge for all of the stuff they did to him and to Miyagi. And then especially, to, I'm not going to say his girlfriend, but, Kamiko. But he doesn't, because that's not what Miyagi taught him. So I think that that's a big thing to see in this movie too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and so one of the things that I really picked up on as well in the film was this, we see earlier this idea of like Daniel's talking about how his life is kind of in chaos and he can't find focus. And I really liked how Miyagi teaches Daniel to slow down, to take a breath and look at his life and not just react with emotion. And I think, again, to me, this seemed to be a really big key for our world, is that I feel like everybody just reacts immediately with the first emotion that hits them. And what Daniel is being taught here is, no, you need to slow down and let go of all of that excess emotion so you can truly look at everything from a more clear-headed perspective. And on top of that, I think what we see is that Miyagi also teaches Daniel the value of hard work, which he continues from the first film, which is that there is a work is really important. It helps us focus. It helps us not take the easy way out. It helps us find ways to do basically brain over brawn, right? And that when you put this idea of like focus and work together, you're in a much better position than to deal with the rigors of life than you would be if you're just emotionally driven and always reacting instead of thinking, you know? And that's kind of what I think what we see in the other characters in the film. Like, so many of this react immediately with their first emotion instead of taking some time to kind of think through the situation, take a breath, and then have a reaction. That's really smart.
Yeah, you see that especially in the scene where, like you said, they're building the house or building Daniel's room attached to Miyagi's house at the beginning, and he's teaching him to stop and focus and to think about just your breathing even, and step back even mentally from the problem and look at it for what it is and then try to figure it out from there. But you see it again then when he's in the bar in Okinawa and trying to break the ice pieces. And he's thinking it's impossible to do this. You know, there were guys probably breaking their hand trying to do 2 or 3, much less 6. And now you're betting on me. But, you know, he's having to use that again to step back from the situation. And even though there's so much noise and, you know, all these bullies around him and everything, that he just closes his eyes and breathes for a few minutes. And then sure enough, he's able to do it because he stopped and focused on the situation rather than reacted. And I think that that's huge in general for dealing with your problems. You know, like you were saying, it's, you can't always be reactionary. And really, I mean, in every situation, it behooves you to think first and then act. So I'm glad that they focus on that. And like something, you know, I think that everyone could take away from it is even in your life in general, we need to focus more on what's important because life is so short. So, you know, you can take it in that aspect.
No, I completely agree. Well, and it really ties with another theme that Miyagi talks about, this idea of principle and passion. You know, and he says that when you put passion before principle, you always lose. And I really, really liked this because I thought it was so key to that idea of why Miyagi wants Daniel to learn how to focus. You know, to learn how to think about a situation before he acts. You know, because if we just let our passions run away with us, and we never hold on to any kind of principle, we're just going to end up in a place where we're being tossed to and fro, you know? And I really love this. You know, I think it's a really important thing. And again, I think it's an even more important theme for our world today than even when this movie came out. If you are driven only by passion, you are just going to burn yourself out. You have to have some sort of guiding principles. And I think it's really I was like, wow, that is such a good thought.
And that's what Miyagi does really with, you know, leaving the situation between he and his best friend and the love of his life. He decided to extricate himself based on his principles rather than to participate in a fight to the death with his best friend purely for passion or purely because of being passionately angry. He says, you know, this is the reason that I can't do that because this has been my best friend my whole life. And I also care about both of these people enough to where I wouldn't want either of them to die because of me. So I'm just going to leave the situation entirely. And so he does. I mean, he shows that over and over again that it's the same thing as, why you need the focus, that you have to react, not be reactive, and think first and use reasoning and go with your, principles, I guess, for lack of a better word, rather than just being emotionally driven.
Yeah, I completely agree. One last thing I saw too, and I kind of like this as well. Miyagi talks to Daniel about this idea of lies, and because of all the lies that are being told by him. And Daniel's like, "Aren't you upset about this?" And he says, "Look, lies others tell about you only become the truth when you choose to believe them." And it is another really interesting thing because it's so easy to have this happen in our world where it's so easy to have lies spread about people. I mean, we look at social media and everything, it's terrible. And so I think, and I really liked this theme. And I was like, man, this theme is so much more difficult now than it was then, because a lie can travel around the world in seconds. Literally seconds on social media, and a person's life can completely be destroyed. So,
and that's the quote I was thinking of earlier. So I'm sorry, I'm glad you included that. He said, "The lies others tell about you only become true when they believe them." So basically, that if someone tells another person a lie about you, if the person that was told believes it, that's where the problem lies. And that you just have to continue being who you are and doing the right thing and let your actions speak for themselves and not listen to that noise, because people are always going to be saying something about you, good or bad, whatever, and possibly have others believe things about you that are not true, but only you can be the one to change that. And just telling them differently may not work, but continuing to be who you are could, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it does.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, because we've had so much good to say about the film. Was there anything in the movie then that you came to that you thought, this part doesn't quite work for me, or this doesn't, just because I think we've had nothing but praise for the movie so far. I was just wondering if there was anything at this point, since it can happen, if there was anything that didn't work for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Earlier I did briefly say the scene where Miyagi says that he spoke to Daniel's mom, but she never actually appears in the movie. That was a little off-putting for me. Just, it feels a little too easy. I would have liked to have had her appear in some way, but maybe, like you were saying, she was doing another project or something. Maybe that's the reason Elizabeth Shue wasn't in it either. But I think it was fine that it didn't also have Elizabeth Shue in it. But the only other thing was, for me, I think, I wish that they had resolved whether or not Miyagi did end up going back to America and bringing Yuki with him.
Yeah.
But those are small, nitpicks. I would say overall, I don't have a lot of issues.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think you picked out the things that I would have liked to have seen with the movie. I do wish that we had, seen, like, basically, like, them just getting on the plane, to go home.
Yeah.
And I think even just that would have been really nice. So, yeah, I would totally have loved to have seen that. And I think that, to me, that was the only detriment to the film. It's like, oh man, like, we spent all this time with Miyagi getting back into this relationship with this woman that he had been in love with, that he had proposed to, and he had to leave his town for, because he would have had to fight his best friend to the death for her. And, like, the fact that they've rekindled this romance because she never got married, and then we never found out in this movie. Like, obviously, this is a third part, so maybe we'll find out there. Yeah. But, that we never resolve that part of the story, I would have really appreciated. But yeah, all in all, I think for the most part, I'm really interested then to see where you come down on this movie with your ratings.
So I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 tea ceremonies because I thought that was so cute. And I will say too, I also didn't mention the music, but of course, Bill Conti came back doing the music again. And of course, it was beautiful and really honored also the Japanese roots. And I liked that. I like cheesy 80s music, and I like the band Chicago. And so Peter Cetera's song Glory of Love was very fitting to me. Mm-hmm. It's an 80s movie. Why not? So, for me, it's a 4.5 out of 5 just because there's a couple little things I might have changed. But I still find it really enjoyable to rewatch. And, I'm interested to see where you rate it. Yeah,
I think so. The first movie I gave 4.5 out of 5. And, I mean, it was, the first one is excellent.
Yeah.
I was really impressed by how well this holds up. I went in and I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And so I was really impressed with the way that this holds up.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed it. There are only a couple of minor things. I think my enjoyment is still a little bit less than the first one. Yeah. So I would say this is a 4 out of 5 for me. But really strong to come back with a sequel like this that is, I would say, good. It's really good. So absolutely, I would definitely recommend anybody going out to check. I mean, I think part 1 and part 2 make a great together, together they make a great duology. So what's going to be fascinating to me to see is how 3 holds up, because if I recall correctly in my mind, 3 did not hold up this way in my recollection. But again, it's been years since I've seen it, so we'll have to wait till we get to that part. But so Christy, it's time now for some recommendations.
I've been waiting for this time, especially because I have a really interesting one. I actually, by accident the other day, found some new things to watch on Stars, because before I said I only got Stars because of Men in Kilts. Well, I found more things to watch, so I'm using it more. But I accidentally came across the documentary called Seduced Inside the NXIVM Cult. And if people might remember, that was the one that was recently uncovered that 2 of the actresses from Smallville were a part of previously. It was this huge case that got blown open, all these people that were either previous or recent members, and how the whole thing even came about. It's, of course, a sad and difficult subject matter to watch because this is real. But I think for me, it helps to have the knowledge of how these things happen so that you prevent yourself from ever being seduced into that kind of thing.
Yep.
Because, we all know that's how cults happen. People are convinced by someone who really believes something until they think that kind of life is normal. And so, it takes a long time for people that have then been brought out of that to get over that. And it's a trauma that they then live with. But I hope that, we can prevent with things like this that ever happening again. So I highly recommend watching it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because on HBO Max, they have a series called The Vow, which is about this same thing from people who are inside the cult. And so if you've seen that one, I would be interested to see what you think of this one because it's really, really fascinating. And they're actually going to do a season 2 for it as well to follow up with all the fact that, the people had been arrested and everything, and so I'll be really fascinated to see what you thought of that one as well. For me, you know what? I'm going to recommend something that I think that, people should really go back and watch. John and I, doing Snyder Cuts, we've walked through all of the things that Snyder's directed. And a lot of people have missed, unfortunately, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, Zack Snyder's animated film. But as we were talking about that, it is just so good. It's a great movie to watch with your family. It's just it's a fantastic film. It's one that you shouldn't sleep on. The themes in it were incredible. So, I highly recommend, checking out that movie and giving it a watch. And, maybe you don't believe me and you want to hear exactly why you should. I mean, you can listen to the Snyder Cuts episode where John and I talk about it. And it's a great film. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I think, I would highly recommend anybody checking it out. So, but Christy, if people want to, catch up with you, see what you've got going on, in life and elsewhere, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BespinBell. And of course, I do another show called Sabers and Spells with my good friend Amanda DeFonso, where we talk about some other more obscure geeky stuff usually. We got into Stranger Things and some things like that, but we're very interested to see where we might go next. We're, picking up maybe going back into Neverending Story, for example. So hope that you'll check out our show, Sabers and Spells, on the Skywalking Through Neverland Network, Skynet. We are, as a show, on Instagram and Twitter as well at Sabers and Spells.
And, of course, you could find me here on the network doing all sorts of things these days. Of course, Snyder Cuts here in the same feed as the 602 Club, which we love to have you check out as we're looking towards Justice League there with Zack Snyder. And we're going to have a massive crossover event between both of the shows as we talk about that. So that'll be coming up for you guys soon. So please, check it out. It's been, honestly... I love podcasting with Christy and doing this show. It's been so much fun. And one of the things that's been a blast is that John and I have been having a blast doing that. Like, we decided to do this together and we had no idea how much fun we were going to have doing it. And so, I just hope people will enjoy it. That's been the joy for us, is just having a good time together. So you can also find me here doing Literary Treks as well as The Orb. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Both of those have had new episodes recently as well, so we're trying to get back to the network, having more episodes all over the place. You can find me on the Nerd Party Network doing 2 shows, talking Star Wars every week with John Mills over on Aggressive Negotiations there, and of course doing Owl Post with Drea Kaufman, as we've been walking through Harry Potter one chapter at a time. And I think as of this recording, we have 6 episodes left. So wow. It's pretty crazy. We're almost done.
Man.
It's insane. And of course, you can find me on social media all over the place under the name MattRushing02. But thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?